Okay, we are live. Welcome to the Gamer Librarian Podcast, the best podcast you can find on this side of the multiverse. I'm your host, Adrian, and this week we have a lot to talk about. There have been a few small updates, just to go over a few of them, right? There was a update on the Planet of the Apes tabletop RPG, which I am a pretty big fan of. I think that's going to be incredibly cool. So they have the starter kit and a cool rule book obviously for it, which is cool. Don't know when we're going to get a chance to play that or have that in our hands, but that is a very cool update for tabletop RPGs. Daredevil got a season 2 trailer for its Born Again series, part of the MCU stuff. And this one shows Jessica Jones and her actress returning, which I think is incredible, on top of Matthew Lillard being mysteriously added as a character here, which is insane. The Virtual Boy joins for Nintendo Switch on their online console stuff. And apparently, there's two never before released games joining the roster, which is called Zero Racer and D Hopper. I mean, that is pretty cool. That is quite a decent incentive for Nintendo Switch and Virtual Boy connoisseurs. And Steam is being sued for $900 million in a lawsuit claiming monopoly things. I don't think that they have any grounds for that. I think that people on Steam, they register to have their game on Steam and they accept whatever terms. It's not like they're the only platform out there, especially nowadays for distributing games. You could just put it on, a web browser and just distribute it on other things. You don't really need Steam, but Steam is where most people are, and it's like the best kind of storefront current system. But before we get into the main things, we are in a video game kind of drought. I mean, there is almost no really new games coming out between now and really the foreseeable future. The only big game that I could think of is Resident Evil 9 Requiem. Now, this is obviously a finale game in the remake, in the not the remake, but the the restructure of Resident Evil in terms of the last three games. I think that in some ways things have been pretty good for Capcom and Resident Evil. Capcom as a whole, Resident Evil massively as their franchise. But is Resident Evil 9 going to be a Resident Evil game that we deserve, or that is in line with what Resident Evil kind of really felt like? And that was just like corporate issues, corporate, misdoings becoming big world problems. And the overall story that they're putting out here for Resident Evil is this weird line with Ethan and his daughter. And then we never played the Resident Evil 8 DLC, which tells a little more on, I think, Rose's story. Maybe before Resident Evil 9 comes out, we'll get a chance to do that. But for Resident Evil 9, Leon coming back is probably the coolest telling that there's going to be or the most telling that there's going to be a more concrete connection to the Resident Evil universe and the last three games. I've said it before here, is that Resident Evil 7 and 8 just kind of feel like games that didn't need to have the Resident Evil or the Biohazard logo on them, but they have things about Resident Evil within them, just minor lore drops, and then maybe the herbs and some of the systems and things like that. Now, the haunted house thing, that I think is more telling for just how minimal it is to connect to Resident Evil until like the very end with all the helicopters from Umbrella and Chris Redfield. And then Chris Redfield has a kind of less minor, more impactful and on-screen presence in Resident Evil 8, where it's more of a haunted castle, but you're just Ethan, and now there's, as far as I know, an very old, like almost like um HP Lovecraft old horror type vibe of Umbrella. And I think that was something that wasn't necessarily addressed very much. But maybe in that DLC they will. But for Resident Evil, it just seems like maybe 9 is gonna be their mix between 8 and Resident Evil 2, where it's far more actiony. It has Leon, and everything else about it is far more flashy in a Resident Evil 6 type motif or something like that. But, the single player Resident Evil games, I think they're all fine and dandy for what they're trying to at least offer as an experience. But for them being Resident Evil 9, like this is a 9. We almost never get nines in the video game title space, right? Maybe one of the last ones is like a real RPG, Final Fantasy, right? So there's like some Tales game or something small that did have a 9 in it. But I think the stakes need to really be there, and the presence and the feel of it being in the larger Resident Evil world, because the last 2 games really did not. It really did not. It's not like Raccoon Cities type stuff. It's not, I mean, to be honest, Resident Evil is really just about visiting Raccoon City. Everything else always felt, very disjointed. Resident Evil 4 is almost just like that, and 5 is just more of like a military mission, but I mean, with great co-op. That's really all that really is. Especially like the co-op. Where's that? That was only Resident Evil 5. I'm not saying Resident Evil 9 Requiem was going to be a bad game in any way, but I played 7. I played 8. Those are good games, but they don't necessarily even felt like they were Resident Evils. Where is our Resident Evil 6 content? Europe was fucking destroyed. I was always under the impression of Resident Evil that the games were like the beginning part of the storyline. And then maybe like intermittently you get like those movies, the animated movies. But then later on, when the world is really fucked after Resident Evil 2, the movie with Alice, all bets are off. And whatever canon for those movies are is whatever. But I don't know. I kind of feel like we're in the time where those should be connected now. And I was always kind of hoping for that in the future. And maybe we'll get that in Requiem. Maybe. Cult of the Lamb. We beat it. We beat Cult of the Lamb. That was a awesome DLC for what it offered. I really actually enjoyed the smaller levels that were just really quick and you can use them to farm, and then you'd have to focus on the boss runs as much as the other ones. But the real star of the show for Woolhaven was the ranching. The ranching was incredible, which, for its 5 or so species that you get to utilize, it offers a nice fresh breath air to the game where you're not dealing with like the trait and the personalities and middle managing of these individuals, but now it's just like, okay, these animals die, I still get resources, but how else can I utilize them? Which is like pretty cool. They offer different ways of helping you grow your entire little cult farm. You can even use them as like fuel for your furnace. Which the other take for this is winter. Winter was cool. Now, I played Woolhaven on my continuation playthrough, which was just like my first playthrough ever, and then all the updates from it, and it was just continued from there. Almost at 300 days, we're at like 281 at the end. For winter, I feel like if that was implemented a little better, it could have been, a much better enjoyment. But for the most part, it was just like, oh, okay, the weather's here, and besides like some thunder, things weren't really all bad. Now, granted, I played on medium, straight up just medium. So maybe I was just resourced out and I didn't have to worry about all that stuff. But I can imagine that doing a from the start run again, because I believe how it works is that you can't access the DLC until you beat the first four areas in a regular run. And to me, I'm just like, I don't know if I like that. I kind of wish it was implemented better where it could have been just from the start, and then you can maybe switch between the two in terms of areas, right? Because it's not the same area for Woolhaven. You can maybe do it at your own leisure. See, I'm not sure. Maybe I should go and do a from the beginning playthrough, but I really do not want to do that ever. Like I don't really want to do that experience again specifically, unless it's with like co-op or anything like that. Because the runs there not as varied as you would think with maybe other roguelites. I think that there could be more room for more weapons, more relics for sure, and all that kind of stuff. I wish there was a little more to that to maybe make the runs a little more diverse. And then choosing a tarot card as well. I wish there was more mechanics with just choosing them from the start or in some way rather than just finding them within the round and all that. But there is kind of like an endless type mode where you can just focus on all of them in one straight shot, which is really, really cool. But we've been looking for the Cult of the Lamb DLC forever, and I'm incredibly excited to say that we finished it, and now it's like it's over. Don't know what else we're gonna be doing for that. It's insane to think that like these were small little DLCs that we were looking forward to, or even just updates on games, and now it's like here we are, still in the podcast talking about them. It's kind of insane. Like we're over the Woolhaven time, and now who knows if they're gonna have any more DLC with that. I think there is probably still a little more room to grow for Cult of the Lamb. I would like to see a sequel, specifically a sequel where maybe it's you're not a lamb this time, but you're any kind of villager and you defect from the Cult of the Lamb and you have to go and kill your original character or whatever, take him into your new cult or whatever. That might be a decent preference because they kind of alluded that's almost the same thing with Woolhaven, but I think maybe making a character of any of the little animal customizations and then doing something where you can have more weapons and all these kind of stuff, more camp systems and things like that. That'd be really fun. And for game updates, like I said, that really was it, except for one. And, you know, don't know how long we're going to talk about this because we haven't played this game specifically in a long time. And I think it's because I'm waiting on this guest character to be revealed. Tekken 8 had their season 3 reveal, and they listed three characters. Apparently, I think they're returning characters. I don't really know if I'm correct on that, but I believe they're returning characters. None of them are new. I could be wrong, but there's a fourth character, and I think it's time that Tekken 7, Tekken 8 introduces their first guest character. Tekken 7 had Akuma, and that was awesome, incredible. And then I think it might have had Clive from Final Fantasy. I could be a little incorrect on that. Maybe Clive came into 8. It's been a long time since I've played a Tekken game, but maybe we can quickly just look. Yeah, see, I think it is Tekken 8. Yeah, he was the first one in season 1. So I don't know if there's a guest in season 2. Maybe we missed that. I feel like I might have heard about that. It's been so long since we've even focused on Tekken that I just don't even remember. Yeah, see, I think it's just Clive from Tekken 8, and then all the characters are returning fan favorites from Tekken 7 and all that stuff. But the fourth one is unknown. And I think it's time that they introduce Tifa from Final Fantasy. I mean, it's one of the most requested ones in there. It just makes sense in terms of a fighting based character like pure fists, they already had the Final Fantasy connection, right? And with that, Tekken kind of opens the avenues for all kinds of new stuff. Maybe they can even just get like non other video game characters. Maybe we can get uh like Goku just punching and kicking or whatever, right? Not that that's anything out of the realm of the norm with crossovers, but maybe I would like to see an era where the most talked about guest character for a Tekken game is not Tifa anymore. Even though I would love that, right? Tifa's awesome, and I just want another reason to go back and play Tekken. But that would just be incredible to see. And for game updates, that's really just it. So now we can talk about the big topic of the day. And, coming off the trails of having Karen Travis as our first guest here, to be able to kind of see where this franchise is going, to get a look into the original idea of Gears of War. And when I say the original idea, I mean just how it was an amalgamation of all kinds of things, which is, I think, one of the greatest things about video games or art forms in any capacity, where you can get inspiration from anywhere and you won't even realize that it's inspiration until years later, right? So I think that just by that point, this book, Control Freak by Cliff Bleszinski, was insane. It was incredibly personal, which was a complete shock to me, right? I figured it might have been a little more reserved in that aspect, but as someone who relatively grew up in the same kind of area, right? Wherever Cliff grew up, he moved around as a kid, and then I just stayed near New Jersey, right? It's all America, and kind of knowing what it's like to be a gamer and seeing how that shapes people, all that kind of influence, life experience. I did not find that book to be nearly as enjoyable as I thought it was. I mean, it was incredibly in depth. It was incredibly like insightful into just game development. So where to begin? I mean, it delves a lot into the early life of Cliff, which, I don't really want to like personally just talk about because a lot of that's out of your control. You're, just a kid growing up and all kinds of things have happened to you. And so the idea that this is just another person who not just played video games, but read comics, movies, manga, all that kind of stuff, you know, feel like that's just kind of somebody who I could have been friends with at any time if we meet at any version of ourselves at any, time period, just because we have similar things to talk about. But when it gets into the real game development scope of it, where he talks about making his first games, trying to put them out there, and then how that experience and influence from there just blossoms. Incredible. Incredible. I found it incredibly eye opening that for someone to like repeatedly try that process and not just fail and stumble, but still want to continue, because that's something that like I think anybody can, relate to, the aspect of failing kind of holding us back. But when you do fail and you still want to keep trying, that is something that's way more respectable, in my opinion. So we started with the Unreal Engine. That's what he kind of got a little bit of hands in, right? A little bit in the pie. He helped develop it for a little bit. And that ultimately made Epic Games, uh, Epic something games into Epic Games into Gears of War. I was really looking forward to just once the Gears of War development started and then how it transitioned into everything else, because that was really the era I knew him in. I was Gears of War head through and through. I even downloaded Gears of War back on the Xbox Series S just now, so that I can play through Horde mode on Gears 3 and Horde mode on Gears 2, which is just even more incredible, just in my opinion, right? I have way more fun, more memories playing that one. I think that that era of multiplayer gaming, going from Quake and Unreal Tournament to Halo and Gears of War, and then with Call of Duty, Battlefield kind of being around the same time frame. And for what we have now, the hero shooters, I mean, I don't think the shooting genre, first person shooting genre, is anywhere near as good as it was in the early 2000s, the 2010s. I don't think so. You know, when I look back at Halo, for instance, because I didn't play Unreal Tournament or Quake as a kid, right? My multiplayer shooting skills, I cut my teeth on Halo, Gears of War, Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops. And that was what I played mostly as a kid. And then for what we have now, what Halo Infinite turned into, ooh, I didn't know that, you know, Cliff Bleszinski, relatively just all the rights from his side of Gears of War, they're gone. They go to Microsoft. I don't know if he gets any kind of residuals just from using the name of for Gears of War 4 or 5 or maybe Tactics. I don't know if he gets any kind of involvement from those games. I don't know if you hear some banging out there, but you know, when I think of what Gears of War Infinite became, I'm just Gears of War Infinite, Halo Infinite. If I see what Halo Infinite became, I don't want Gears to be that. To me, Gears is one of those games that has so many things about it that, like, not having certain aspects, just like how Halo Infinite didn't have co-op, campaign co-op. I don't think it had the skulls. I don't think it had legacy maps, legacy weapons. It was called Halo Infinite. It doesn't have every map and weapon just there. Bullshit. The new Gears of War game is called Gears of War E-Day. And for me, that comes with so much. Like, it's one of the eras of Gears of War that we've never seen before. Just Emergence Day. And then, you know, that's basically all we know. Everything else about it could just be, it could be a Marcus Phoenix game. It could not be a Marcus Phoenix game. It could have two-player co-op, could have four-player co-op, could have no co-op, could have no horde mode, could have no beast mode or anything like that. I don't know. It would definitely have battle pass, that's for sure. On a multiplayer, that's definitely for sure. But you know, I look forward to Gears of War E-Day so much because, right, I still enjoyed 5. 5 was fun. 4 was still fun. Tactics was fun. But like, are multiplayer games fun now? Not really. Not to me, right? It's all just like Fortnite or whatever. Battlefield 6, it's boring, right? I really loved Gears. Gears has this style to it, this world, the picking skins for your characters and so all the different characters from the lore, and the Locust as well. Gun skins are fine. They were introduced in Gears 2, I guess, with the Gold Lancer. So that was what really drove me to get this book, was Gears of War. Like, that was, of course. And then obviously something even more I think influential than Gears of War was, he was in the early development of Fortnite. Like, for whatever it's worth, that is an crazy part of the story where he's working on the first original concepts of Fortnite. He helped to name it. You know, I hope that he gets at least some kind of money or something, because Fortnite is now the biggest game in the entire gaming industry. It's the most marketable. You can get all your franchises in them. It's pretty easy to print money on that, right? It's got like South Park and The Simpsons going at it together, Family Guy, I think, Star Wars, The Avengers, all that nonsense. Maybe one day it'll get Gears of War if it didn't already get it. So Fortnite was not the game back then that it is now. And that's, is what it is. He tells his story in his book. I hope that if you're listening to this, you go and read that book, because the book is good, incredibly personal. And as somebody who grew up through most of the era that Cliff Bleszinski was developing games for, it was incredibly eye opening, because to me as a kid, I was just like, oh, these are just games on the shelf, right? I didn't look into who made them. I'm sure I saw Cliff Bleszinski announce them at E3 and all that, and then maybe a few like interview stuff. But do we ever really like think about what it takes for somebody to try and have that kind of perseverance and work ethic to get these games out, to even like turn them into a kernel of an idea to a finished product? I mean, working from obviously studios and teams of people where you have millions of dollars behind you to hire people and keep them, working. That's very different to say against somebody like Concerned Ape, the creator of Stardew Valley, did it all on his own with obviously support in other places, but not in a team job function. I think that like talking about how that works, the inner team play, whether, one of the aspects that I think that was never really ever really talked about in gaming is how like the collaboration effort works in between people of different company levels. Like, what does that really mean when your boss is kind of your friend, and sure, they may have helped you get the job, but now their name is being used on other games. Their, time is being spent on other games, and they're getting recognition for all this kind of stuff, while somebody else may be doing some more publicity or other kinds of ways of being part of the game. And then you have to split, and then someone on the line that's like, you know, this is the end of the game, the studio, you know, whether the effort makes the final product or not. I think that like talking about these kind of things and how social events, world events like Gamergate and things shape industries, incredibly important. All that mentioned in Control Freak. And for me, it was nice to see somebody be able to share their experience and feel like they're still able to be in the industry or the work and put forward effort. I mean, I don't really know if he has that kind of that belief now, but I would play another Cliff Bleszinski game. That's for sure. I don't know if it will be Jackrabbit or Lawbreakers, but I would play another Cliff Bleszinski game because incredible. You know, one thing that that's really difficult to keep my head around is how many people just like keep moving between these studios over the last like 20 years. Like, that's insane. There's some incredible people who go from working on one studio on one title to another and then another and all that interplay. And, considering that Gears of War may still be a franchise with a brand new game and Cliff Bleszinski isn't even like working on it or doing anything about it, especially after hearing this story, going from hearing most of the impactful moments that created Gears of War, inspired Gears of War. I don't know. I don't know if Gears of War E-Day could even like come close to that. But, here's hoping. Here's hoping. Anyway, that was a incredible book. We don't really get a chance to read a lot of gamer, game dev autobiographies, but for the most part, I definitely recommend reading this book because it is very insightful and a very like personal story to the point where like you can see a lot of things about this person, a lot of flaws. I mean, there are some flaws. Obviously, as a young person, you grow, you change as a person. That is definitely one thing. You got to try and meet people on like an even level. And this is a story about him going from being a kid to a full adult, right? Where you see a lot of ups and downs in a person's life. So to be like, someone is a horrible person or the best person at all times forever. No, no one is. But he made Gears of War. And for what it was, I think that is a better game on Microsoft's docket than Halo ever is or was. Like the Gears of War story is way better than the Halo story. I don't know what we're talking about here. So that's just my take on it. Control Freak, great book, 10 out of 10. And we will end on this manga, right? I mean, this is the first book in a very long time, first book of the year, but manga. We on manga all the time, and we don't get a few updates, right? Freerin didn't get a new chapter. I don't think JoJo's, and definitely no Dragon Ball. Makes me sad that there's no new Dragon Ball stuff, but we get in the show sit, right? Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo. We got two chapters in the last week, which is pretty cool. 19 and 20. Yuji Itadori is making a crazy, crazy entrance in these last few chapters. I mean, whatever he was doing in between the main manga and now, that might be fleshed out later on in here, but I'll say it. That sounds like a movie vibe. Let's just let it be a movie. Don't flesh it out in the manga. Let the manga kind of ride its own way out. You can allude to things. I would allude to things. Just make it a movie. And then obviously, they'll probably do like a side manga or make it a movie then, right? But so far the action is insane. I mean, it's way more large scale than initially JJK was, but now it's by the end of the first show and there was some pretty big open battles, but now it's insane. This is bonkers. Everything's happened here is incredible. Chainsaw Man 227. I want these girls to die. The demon devil girlfriends, they all just need to go. Let Chainsaw Man do his own thing somewhere else. These fights just need to go. They're taking too long. I couldn't tell you where and I think Chainsaw Man might end, but I'm kind of feeling like I want it to end soon. It feels bad, but I just feel like I don't really like what's been happening these last few chapters. It's just kind of been dragging out a little bit, in my opinion. One Piece 1172. Elbaf knows the full truth about Loki and that they are the enemy of the world government. I mean, what else can you say there, right? Apparently, Zoro and Brook, they have plans to help free those kids, whatever that may be. And then most of the flashbacks for this, I think Elbaf are done. We'll probably have a few more for some minor characters just to establish, but I think now it's just pure raw action. And then who the big bad is here on this island, probably unsure, but I feel like this island is going to be an island where the pirates aren't running away from the government. I think the government fully runs away this time and everything works out pretty well there. Yeah, that's pretty much for manga. Manga has been a pretty good topic here on the podcast just to keep us going week by week. And really, until Dragon Ball comes back, it's just kind of, you know, hit and miss whether we talk about a certain series or not, if it's not One Piece. Malcolm in the Middle. We started rewatching that. That has its re show remake or sequel, whatever, coming out on Hulu. And we're going to be seeing a random movie in like later tonight, which is supposed to be a horror movie. Apparently, it's an unreleased horror movie. Fingers crossed that it's The Strangers Chapter 3 or Scream. I would much more prefer Scream, but we did start watching The Strangers Chapter 2, which I don't like right now, but we'll save that for next week. Other than that, let me know if there's any video games or books or comics, manga that you want me to experience, talk about here for the podcast. We try to do it all. Anyway, peace.